of Sheffield, UK. Currently, he is head the Knowledge Technology Research Group and Deputy Dean of Academic at FTSM. He also the members of the International Association for Ontology and its application, as known as IAOA, and IEEE Computer Science Society Association. Okay, we take a look to the second panel. Okay, the second panel we have Prof. Madya, Dr. Muhammad Zakree, Ahmad Nazri. He's from Data Mining Optimization, DMO Lab. He received PhD and degree in Computer Science from University of Technology Malaysia, UTM. He also head of project for numerous research that funded by the government and industry. His current research interests include data and text analytics, decision support system, and machine learning. He contributes articles to numerous journals such as Information Science, Computers and Industrial Engineering, and Natural Computing. Okay, the third panel, we have Dr. Zaid, Abdi, Alkareem, Alyasseri. He received a PhD in Computer Science from the University Science Malaysia, USM. He also the senior lecturer at the FTSM. The research interest is in optimization, pattern recognition, EEG, brain computer interface, signal and image processing. He surveyed as an associate editor and reviewer in more than 25 high reputation journals such as IEEE, Elsevier, Springer, Wiley, and Hillary. Okay, that's some of information about their background, our panel background. So we'll proceed to the next section, which is checked by Mr. Mohamad.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Norizal. So we hope their experience and knowledge can help us with our questions. We prepared some questions. We want to ask those panelists to share some of their experience. However, this webinar is going to be separated into 4 segments. We are going to start with the first segment. It gives some introduction on the research gaps and ask what is the research gap and how to investigate and how to find the research gaps. And those questions are compiled based on some of our faculty students. They were asking these questions and we try to combine them and try to direct them to our panelists. So this is the first segment, which is the introduction. The second segment, Dr. Zaid is going to present some of his knowledge regarding the research gap. And then the third segment, we are going to take the opinion on from Dr. Zakree and Prof. Shahrul for their opinion regarding the technical part of investigating and finding the research gap. And for the fourth segment, we'll take questions from the chat, from Facebook and Zoom. So if you have any question that is not answered during the research gap, please put it in the chat at the end for the fourth section. So let's start with the first section. Mr. Norizal, he has the first question directed to Prof. Shahrul. Please, Mr. Norizal.
Okay, my first question is to Prof. Shahrul. Okay, what is the research gap based on Prof knowledge in the research area? Can Prof explain a little bit about it? Prof. Shahrul.
Prof. Shahrul, the microphone is off.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum and a very good afternoon. Thank you for the introduction, Mr. Norizal as well as Mr. Muataz. Right, just a brief introduction what our research gaps are. So first of all, I want to define what gap is. Okay, if you look carefully, what does gap means? It is generally, it means there's a break. Okay, there's a break or hole between two objects, right? So gaps means we need to bridge those gaps together. Okay, so means that there's a space or interval, a break in continuity, and gap usually refers to space between where we are now, right, the present state, and where we want to be, which is the target state. Okay, so in terms of research, we can view gap from the perspective of a topic or area for which missing or insufficient information limits the ability to research to reach a conclusion or a question. Right? I believe that most of you are PhD candidates or research students. Usually when you start doing your research, you will identify the state of the art of certain area. Right? The state of the art means what is the knowledge area in that domain. Okay? So from the state of the art of the area, you want to reach certain conclusion, okay, certain conclusions. But before you can reach that conclusion, there is some gap. There's a gap where you need to bridge that gap by doing research. Okay? So the first task in identifying gap, to identify gap, is to do or to find state of the art in the research area. I just share some slides here. Yeah, very simple one. One moment. All right, okay, where the Zoom share buttons? All right, okay, sorry. Right, so when you focus on, when you want to find the gaps, of course you need to know the current state of your research area. Okay, means that you need to identify the state of the art. Okay, so this can be achieved from thorough literature review. Okay, you cannot find a problem, you cannot find a gap without detailed literature review in your area. Okay, and then based on that state of the art, you know that you want to reach certain solutions. Okay, what you want to achieve, right? And from that, you need to know some problem statement here. Okay, and these are the gaps, right? These are the gaps. So in order to bridge between the current state of the art to the expected solutions, then you need to do research. Okay, so from there, you know there is some missing information, or there are some missing information, or missing what you call techniques or whatsoever, or which it deters you from which the expected solutions or expected outcome from your research. Just for example, during my PhD studies, quite a long time ago during my PhD study, my major is more on the knowledge-based computer-aided software engineering, KB case tool, knowledge-based case tools, where my task at that time was to build an intelligent case tool which is able to perform two aspects of design, which are design synthesis and design diagnosis. Okay, my focus at the time is to model or to automatically build or intelligently build a database design model. Okay, so of course I need to do a lot of literature review, and then from there, during that time there are so many case tools which are meant to support database design. Okay, knowledge-based case tool for to support database design, and people keep on proposing new models, new knowledge model, and so on. So during that time, there are three types of popular knowledge model called dictionary, thesaurus, and knowledge reconciliation approaches. So these three approaches were meant to support design of database model, right? And then came new model at that time called ontology, right? So people have not yet investigated the role of ontology in the task of database design. Okay, so there's a gap there, right? There's a gap. So it is a new model. It is yet to be explored in the case of database design modeling. Therefore, I found that there is a gap in the research, right? Gap in the research whereby how can ontology improve or enhance the quality of database design model via a knowledge-based case tool. Okay, and then there's one aspect. one of the gap. The other gap I found at time is about design synthesis and design diagnosis, right? Most of the case tools are only meant for synthesizing design model. Not many focus on diagnosing or detecting errors in database design model, right? So there's a gap there, okay? And this gap was found from detailed literature review, right? So two gaps were found there. One is the role of ontology to support database design. The second one is the role of ontology and other knowledge model to support design diagnosis. Okay, so you can see from my example there. First, we have the current state of the art. Okay, what happened in the area. Okay, and then of course, you know, within your area, you know what is the expected solution. You want to increase performance, you want to increase accuracy. In the case of classification, you want to increase accuracy. In the case of information retrieval or semantic search, you want to increase in terms of question and recall, those performance metrics, you know what are the expected solutions, right? Now, based on the current state of the art, yes, these are the gaps. Okay, these are the gaps, and then yes, from those gaps, you start to design your research. Okay, your research knowledge in such a way that you're able to bridge between the current state of the art, the problem, with the expected solutions. Okay, so that's my first what you call it introduction about gaps. Right? Maybe other panels can provide their opinions about what are research gaps. So thank you, Mr. Muataz. Sorry, Norizal. Yeah.
Thank you, Prof. Shahrul. That's a good way to look at it, where you expect or look at the problem and look at the expected solution, and therefore from there you can see where is the gap. And yes, of course, it does require a lot of research, and you need to read a lot to find that is true. Okay, we have another question directed to Dr. Zakree. So Dr. Zakree, how do we define a research gap if there is a lack of information? For example, there is a research topic or a domain where, let's say it's a new domain with not enough information, not enough publications to find a gap. How do we define a gap in this situation? What's your opinion on this?
Thank you. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Mr. Muataz, for your kind introduction and questions, and Mr. Norizal for your kind introduction. And thank you for having me in this forum. By the way, I'm very humble in the presence of our great panelists, Prof. Shahrul and Zaid, and also the participants, my colleagues, professors, lecturers, perhaps professional practitioners from Nazri, and also students. I would like to thank you to each and every one of you for being here with us today. The event manager told me that this forum should be casual and relaxed, so I'm trying my best to be relaxed, but I can't because the question is quite hard. It should be answered by Prof. Shahrul. Sorry again. The question is how to define research gap if there is a lack of information in the research topic or in the research domain. I believe the question, what is meant by lack of information, means he couldn't find a paper or couldn't find a journal in his or her area of research related to his work. Well, my first reaction, if my student asking me this question, my immediate response would be, wow, you are going to win a Nobel Prize like John Nash. And then I will ask, I will say, are you serious? Let us check again your research question and what are the key terms used for searching. I'm really sorry because this will be my response. You see, AI is a research field because we're talking about AI. We are talking about research field developing programs with the ability to learn and reason like human. We try to develop programs or machines that can perform services that require either a human or biologically or nature-inspired algorithm to perform that services. And the field of modern AI began in 1950s. Let me share about the history of this our field. Yeah, I know you can see that this is the history of artificial intelligence beginning from 1642 and up to the modern, when Alan Turing developed the intelligent machine to decipher codes. And now we are in 2020. So in 2018, most universities have courses in artificial intelligence, and now the car can drive by itself and so on. So what I'm trying to say here, actually, when someone's saying that there is a lack of information in the research topic, it means that his work is either really, really novel, not belong to any fields, the existing fields, not belong to NLP, not belong to robotic, machine learning, or not belong to machine perception or machine consciousness. So either it's really novel, or the problem is with their keywords, with the students' keywords or key terms when searching. So if your work is truly novel, then my answer is whatever is available, even you only have 2 journals that you can build your research gap, I think it is enough. So if you look into a history, John Nash wrote his PhD dissertation called Non-Cooperative Game, Non-Cooperative Game at Princeton in 1950. So the text of his thesis was really brief. It only consists around 26 pages, right? So, and John Nash only cited 2 texts. The first one is John von Neumann and Oscar Morgenstern's about theory of games and economic behavior, which was published in 1944. And another one is self-citation, which is John Nash's own paper, which is a proceeding, if I remember. You see, Mr. Muataz, there are only 2 papers can lay the foundation for his dissertation in the development of game theory, which later John Nash won the Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences in 1994. So if you are not just you, if we are not belong to John Nash, so perhaps there's something wrong with your research question. This is finding a research question is a crucial step in our research. So it will guide our overall research activity. So again, the question about if there is a lack of information in our research topic, so actually it means that, like Prof. Shahrul said, research gap means there are a topic or area which missing or insufficient. So we need to look back into how do you derive your question. So let's compare to this question. So when you ask a question like, what is the best algorithm for classification structured data? So you will find a lot of paper, or maybe perhaps no paper at all, because nobody can tell you what's the best algorithm. So, but I wanted to tell you that every day in this era of Industrial Revolution 4.0, at least 1,000 papers being published in a day, 1,000 papers in a day. So when you say that there's a lack of information, so I would like you to check again your research questions. So first, if you look into the first question, you can see that the question is quite general. What are the best algorithms for classification structured data? So perhaps you cannot find any gap when you use this question. But when you look into the second questions, what are the effects of hybridizing local search on the classifier? Let's say K nearest neighbor, which is the simplest algorithm available for classifier, to reduce processing time and cost for KNN for finding possible COVID-19 patients without symptoms. Why I'm using COVID-19 patients? Because I want to shift into a separate domain, and then to show that the problem with the data is insufficient. So in other words, we are looking for ways that the current algorithm is lacking or having problem to effectively or efficiently find possible COVID-19 patients. Why possible COVID-19 patients? Because without symptoms, it means that the problem with the data is insufficient data. We are dealing with data sparseness. We are dealing with imbalanced data sets. So you need to rectify your research question. And then let's go back to the basic general step for finding research gap. You need to identify your key motivating issue questions. So what are the problems? Not looking for the algorithms, but looking problems in algorithm. Second, identify key terms. Third, search and review the literature. And four, identify issues not addressed by the literature. One thing that I noticed when I read most of the cases when I become an examiner is students are not able to differentiate between problem statement, problem background of the problem, and problem statement. Sometimes what they have written for their problem statement actually is just background of the problem. So I hope this answered the question, Mr. Muataz. And if you have further question, maybe you can ask and proceed so we can answer it in the fourth round. Thank you.
It's very, very clear answer. And by focusing on the question, I agree. Focusing on the question can help us see where is the gap or what is the gap we are trying to achieve. Thank you, Doctor, for this answer. I hope it can clarify for some of the students. And yes, I did face this issue before in my thesis, where my background was very similar to the problem statement. So that was about the third semester or fourth semester. So I did try to distinguish between these two, and that is very common issue. I've seen in some other colleagues' research also. They do have similarity between them, and in this case, it shouldn't be. Mr. Norizal, you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question. But a good explanation by Dr. Zakree. Okay, another question from us. How to find a gap from a study that did not mention any limitation of further work? Can we try the solution in the study to find the gap? What is your opinion? Can Dr. Zaid give the opinion?
Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Mohamad and Mr. Nabil, for inviting me for this webinar. And also thank you for Prof. Shahrul and Dr. Nazri for the very useful information. So regarding your question, from my opinion, actually, I working as a reviewer and special editor for many high reputational journals. So unfortunately, around 90% from published paper, they don't have certain section as limitation or clear. They mention this is the limitation in the paper. So in this case, my recommendation is to read it in depth, and because the gap it doesn't come in overnight, so you have to read the paper and you have to understand the paper and what is the main point in the paper, and then you have to summarize the paper, and then you have to find the limitation. So don't wait the authors mention you this is the limitation in my paper and please work on this limitation. Another section in your questions about the future work section. I will be honest with you from my opinion. So when I write paper for me or my student write paper, so this section is when we write the future work, it's already done or it's under working. So when mentioned that this is the future work, so that means this is not for other people. No, this is for future work for our team. So, but if you are lucky, sometimes you will find some lazy team or lazy group. They don't work on the future work direction, so you can go on. But my suggestion is find the gaps or limitations in their work in behind the text. So you have to read carefully and reread. So when inshallah after the segment 2, I will show you some example how to find the gaps from the state and how to find it. And this is my answer regarding your questions.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Zaid. Thank you. That is very clear. And of course, based on your experience with as an editor, seeing the papers before they get published and seeing them after, see those authors, some of them, they stick to the same journal. So you must have experience with probably the same author, seeing how and what is he working on next, if he did the future work or not. Yes, and some maybe students, they finish their PhD and they have future work, but they stop publishing after. Depends on where they work, what the research field they get into. Thank you, Doctor. So next question, we want to get back to Prof. Shahrul. This question is about investigating a gap in the future. So how to investigate a gap that is expected in the future. So if you're expecting some gap that might happen in the future, how do you investigate? For example, something related to COVID or vaccination or something we're expecting, but how do we investigate this?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Muataz, for the questions. Right. Before I answer that question about what you expect, whether the gap is expected to appear in the future, I just give a quick guide in terms of when you read journal papers or good conference proceedings, you will find that at the introduction part, usually the authors will describe first the state of the art in the area, right? And then the gap, and then of course the problem statement, and then followed by the research questions. Okay, that's a common way of how authors describe their research work. Right. Just let me show something. Your question is rather tough, so I just start with this first. Okay. So just a quick, this is my paper back in 2019 in expert system applications. First of all, this is where when you read the introduction part, you will find this area, this part. Okay? This is the part where when you see the word however here, of course, we will describe previously about the state of the art in the area. But when you see the word however within the introduction part, it shows that the authors start to describe the gaps. Okay? So in this case about in semantic web applications, about the ground for the logic reasoner, right? The same as the second paper here. This is about boosting algorithm. Okay, so again, it provides some what I call some intro or some background there, or the state of the art in the area, and then what are the problems, and when you see the word however there, you start to describe the gap, okay? the gap of the research area, and then followed by the how you intend to overcome the gap, right? Okay. Same is for this. This one for conclusions. Okay. When you mention about what you expect, how actually your research or the gap relevant in the context of in terms of the future area, right? Okay. That can be done from. First of all, you need to understand that whether your research area is still relevant or not. Okay. Let's say you are doing my work now mainly focused on recommender systems. So first of all, you need to know whether your area is still relevant or not. That can be done from detailed literature review, or you can read from good review papers we discuss about the state of the art in the area, right? So in this case, this is about recommender systems. This shows, I think this paper shows, this figure shows the trend of publications in this area about recommended system. It keep on going up. Of course, slightly down in 2015, but it's still relevant. Okay, but this paper was published in 2015, but recommended system is still being used till now. And of course, when I talk about recommended system, it is all about try to suggest something for users, right? Let's say you are customers of certain e-commerce applications such as Amazon.com. In Malaysia, we have Lazada, Shopee, and so on. So these applications such as Amazon.com keep on predicting what are the items that customers are interested to buy. Okay, so and that is very, of course, with the current situation whereby people look for reviews, look for items on the internet to buy, recommended systems are still the hot topic of research area. Okay, from the trend here, although it stopped 2015 this review, but from my current review, it's still going up because of the current trend, whereby people buy things over the internet, right? They use this e-commerce application, they use Amazon.com, they use Lazada, they use Shopee and whatsoever to buy things. In order to buy those items, so this e-commerce application will exploit what this trend by providing recommendation to them, right? So it's in such a way that a new algorithm keep on what we call coming out in order to improve the quality of recommendations. So that's one way. First of all, you need to look at the trend, whether your research are still relevant or not. Okay, and that can be done from detailed review or look for good review papers which shows the trend. That's one way. This is another papers by, and you need to know whether what methods are suitable. For example, in the case of recommended systems, okay, you have few methods. You have collaborativity, you have content-based, you have knowledge-based, hybrid. Others are mainly machine learning and so on. So you see the trend there. Okay, so from this trend, you know that CF is the most popular method that you need to explore further. Okay, and in fact, CF or collaborative method or collaborative filtering method is being used by Amazon.com, is being used by most of the e-commerce applications, right? So from there, you know you are the right track. Okay, from this paper or from this review paper, you know, okay, I should focus on collaborative filtering, and with the current trend of how people buy things, items, yes, this is the trend. Okay, same as here, this figure that shows the distribution of selected papers. Okay, within the context of context-aware recommended systems. Okay, so okay, this one is a different one. Okay, so that's how you try to predict. Okay, predict whether your research or the gap is still relevant. First, you need to understand that whether is your research still relevant. So in my case, I did my PhD in 1998. I got my PhD in 1998. It's about knowledge-based case database design tools. Okay, it is all about how you apply knowledge model to support the design of database, and that research is no longer being researched anymore. Okay, it's faded already because people are not interested with this so-called knowledge-based tools anymore, and because there are so many others. I think most of the database management system now are clever enough to support the design database, so we don't teach any more knowledge-based so-called design tools. What happened now is that we are talking about the wisdom of the crowd. We are talking about online social networks. We are talking about the so-called social network. We're talking about e-commerce application. We are still very popular. Therefore, from that trend, we try to match what people are being researched in these review papers. Okay, so that's how we look for whether our gaps are still relevant in the future. Okay, Mohamad.
Okay, thank you. That is a clear answer for investigating. And yes, it is based on the trend. You need to find the trend. And one thing I would like to note is finding a good quality review paper is hard for beginners, someone who is getting into research or master student. Knowing that's a good review paper to rely on is not ideal, and maybe they can take an advice from someone who is experienced in research before they decide this is a good review paper to rely on, and to find the gaps, or which is the main way is they need to actually go by themselves and start doing the review to learn, and then maybe they can decide what is a good review paper, or they might find the gap that is expected investigated by themselves. Thank you, Dr. Prof. Shahrul, for your answer. So now we finished the first segment of this session. If any of the profs and doctors, if you have any comment you would like to add for the first segment, which is the introduction, you may so. But the next segment is going to be presented by Dr. Zaid. He's going to give more of practical part of the research gap. So Dr. Zaid, you may start with your presentation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Muataz again. May I know how many times I have? How many times I have?
Time, like 20 minutes.
Okay.
I think 20 minutes is okay.
Okay, so okay, thank you again. In this short presentation, I will give some setup tips, how to identify and how to improve your research experience. So this is my profile in Web of Science and Google Scholar Review. If you are interested, you can find some papers here. And this is some selected paper from what we've done before. Okay, so today I will talk about four points. The first point I will skip it because it's clear defined by Prof. Shahrul and Dr. Mohamad. But maybe I will just add some more one definition about research gap. So, in my opinion, the research gap is something like the missing piece in the literature, or the area it has not been explored yet. So your task is find the missing piece and try to identify it in the standard way, and how to present it. This is your task during your PhD or during your master's. So it is not easy task, but if you working hard, you can do it. Actually, the research gap, there are several types of research gap. There are, according to literature, there are 7 research gaps. It's according to evidence, knowledge, and practical methodology, and empirical, theoretical, and population gaps. So after that, so when you do literature review, and before you do literature review, when you select your topics and you do your research literature review, then you have to identify what is your research gap. It's under which category or key category. Okay. Regarding the evidence gap, it's something like we can say there's a conflict in the results. So the authors show some results and claim this is the result of the case or something like that. And according to the literature, and also you find some gaps in his or her results. So your task is to find this gap from their works. Okay, because no one, when you publish paper, you will show your results have done perfectly and there is no gap. But your task is to determine or to find the gaps from the text or from your analysis. So later on we will show how to start. For the knowledge gap, there is something, it's called desired research finding does not exist. So the bridge between knowledge is missing. So you have to find it. And maybe some of these gaps, it's not related to artificial intelligence study, but some of them it's practical knowledge gap. There is something it's called the research which doesn't cover the finding it doesn't cover by research. So only still doesn't work. So if you find something like that and you can start to, but it, from my opinion, it's difficult to start with this one. So some many students take the normal gaps to start with. Many students is working with methodology gap. So in the methodology gap, or something called it's a research design gap. So the current methodology needs to improve, or it's necessary to generate a new idea. So there is some gap in the methodology. So you have to work on the methodology to improve the results. So the gap is in the methodology design. Also for the other research gap, it's called empirical gap or evaluation about gaps. So here in this kind of gap, the author is claimed, but they need to be evaluated or empirical validate for their result or their finding. Also, there is another kind of gap. It's related to theoretical gap. So maybe the theoretical it doesn't apply yet for real world applications or real systems. So this is also the one gap between theoretical and practical. Other gaps, it's related to population gaps. So maybe some research working on some race or age or this is also considered one gap. But here you have to make understanding between the gap and scope, because some students may have some misunderstanding between the gap and the scope. So this is also maybe there is a problem. So now, after we give this is our report. This is seven research gaps. So what is the solution? So how to identify your research gap correctly? Or, okay, how to work or to define your research gap? Is there any way? Yes, there are two methods. The correct method is starts with doing your literature review. So for that, the first step in your PhD or your or when you do any research, so you have to start with doing review for the literatures, and then after spend a lot of time, you can find a gap from the literature, and this is the gaps you will lead you to research a question or hypothesis for your research. So for that, this is the first stage or the first step when you register as a PhD student or master's student. Your supervisor, after you select your topic, he or she asks you go ahead to do literature review. And in my opinion, when you spend time to get a good literature review, this is will lead you to easy to find a gap and will lead you to find your research questions easily. Because when you do a comparative analysis and do some systematic review, of course, you will spend maybe 6 to 7 months, and maybe many students, yeah, this is boring time. I just read a lot of paper, and some paper it's difficult to understand, different style, different writing, but you have to do it. Your task is to find your gap. So now you have a paper and start to read it. So each paper, when you select, for example, 100 or 200 papers in this topic, so for each paper, you have to get some points after read it. Maybe sometime when I ask my students, so what do you understand from this paper? He said, I doesn't get his message in this paper. I said, read it again. Because maybe there is something in the text, maybe you don't focus about it. So for please, when you read a paper, make notes for each paper. And for example here, when you read the paper, you have to, after you read it, you have to answer the following questions. For example, what is the problem in this paper? And what is the authors try to address or what is the purpose of this paper? Because maybe if you don't find the problem for this the paper, so why you spend some time to read it and you don't find it? So this is the problem. So please, when you read the paper, you have to get the problem for the paper you read it, and also what is the motivation for the paper, and also and you can, in my opinion, for example, for any paper, you can make this is the question as a column, as a table, and try to summarize the paper, each paper by one row. And after that, when you read, for example, 100 paper, you will find like Excel sheet. It answer all the questions. After that, you can do some analysis for this works to find the research. And what is the weakness? You have to find the weakness from the existing approach, which is mentioned in the paper or in the related work section. Because in the paper, some authors try the related work is part of the introduction, and some of authors is divided to introduction section and related work section. So try to find the weakness from existing approach. This will help you to find the gaps. And also, this is the most important thing. What is the new in this paper? What is the novel, or what is the contribution in this paper? And also, how they prove their claims. How to prove this is the method. working well, and compared with the existing methods, they achieve better results. What is the strategy they follow? So from this one, you can get a banking of information. This is, you can use it later when you write paper, when you find a gap, and also looking for the future work. And I put in for each paper, I remember my supervisor, Ahmad from University Science Malaysia. He said, when you read a paper or read any word or any statement, you find it, ask why the authors put this is statement here, and why he mentioned this is information. So when you ask, you will find a lot of answers. Maybe one of these answers will lead you to get a get to find the search question. So after so before for that, you describe what is you will get from the reading paper. Then after that, after you are reading, so what you will do? First, you have to for each paper you have to mention the problem which answer in paper, and also ask ask is there any alternative approach you can apply for the same process? For example, they are using meta-heuristic algorithm for find the optimal solution for engineering problem. Is there any other approach you will apply and you can find good results? So when you try to ask, you will find some answer. This is answer. Maybe you will get a good knowledge lead you to find the information. And also, when you're looking for the argument or approach, is there any conflict in the result? Any different methods? So try to answer. Try to ask and try to find the answer from literature or from the same paper. So for that, when you asked me before about how to find the limitations from the works, so maybe some authors they don't mention in the same paper they have a problem. But if you follow the same researcher, so researcher A is published the first paper in 2019, and after that in 2020 published another paper. They mentioned there is a problem in the previous work. So try to follow the same technique to find the approach and try to find where the authors hidden the information about the limitation, because maybe some authors they don't put the limitation in a certain section, but they put inside the text. Also, this is another good question. How can me to working to improve their results? So they using, for example, standard data set, and the data set is already online. I can download it and working on this data set. So first, for example, if you're working on now COVID-19 classification or clustering or something like that. So now there are many data sets available online. So for example, try to download the data set and try to follow the same approach. What they use. They use, for example, doing KNN or K clustering for the data set. So try to implement the same approach and compare your results with them. If you get the same result, this is good point. If you don't get the same result, try to find why you don't get the same result. Maybe you will don't fully understand their method. So try to rewrite, read and try to find what is missing in your approach. And after you get the same result, try to improve. So one of when you try to improve by improve the technique. So here you can say there is a gap in their technique. So and try to evidence your claim with some literature, good literature to prove there's a problem in their method. And also, what are the research can be applied to another? So, for example, they are using, clustering technique for COVID-19. So, if there is any possible way to apply the same approach to different diseases, so try to ask you this question and try to try to find your answer from the literature and try to find the answer. So when you ask yourself, you will find a lot of answer. And please, any question, any answer, try to make note and save. And try to summarize. Is there any some gaps in the work? For example, they use uh, small data sets. They use offline techniques. They using. So try to summarize their uh, their gaps. Okay. Uh, Here there are some common mistakes in the presentation for the research gaps. One of these a problem is uh, the new students for PhD or master, they don't know from where they start. So they spend one semester, 2 semesters, they don't do anything. Just try to collect the related work, and after that try to summarize their this way. But they they there's something ambiguous. They don't know what happened for this time. This is coming because maybe the student select a topic he not interested, and also he don't or she don't have a good knowledge or good background about it. So because they don't know what they do. So in this case, please don't be quiet for a long time. Try to ask your supervisor and try to ask your friend what I have to do. I follow this technique. It's correct or not. Don't be quiet for one semester, and after that you come to your supervisor. You don't do anything. going to reducing time, neural bandwidth, and others. So they heard this is the missing, and he or she will cover in the proposed paper. So this is the one way to cover your research gaps and present it for your supervisor, for your journal as a paper. So you can follow the same technique. But before that, you have to do a good literature review. Because when you do literature review, you will summarize the previous literature review. Okay. Also, here there is another example about what I done in my PhD. Actually, my working was using brain signals, EEG, as a new biometric authentication technique. And here this is I participate in international competition in Miyazaki, Japan, 2018, and our team won the first prize. So from the literature, I found 5 gaps. So this is the first gap in the pre-processing technique. So this is in the methodology problem. So, and also the second gap in the feature extraction method and classification gaps technique, and also the second gap in the public data set. The public data set has many problems. So the problem is to take time because they have a lot of have 64 electrodes or sensors over the head. So I don't need to use all these channels to select to get the highest accuracy. So what I have done, I select the optimal subset from these, and this is from literature. So now we find the gaps from literature, and we write down as a research question, because the good gap, it will lead you to write one or more than research question, and the research question will lead you to get your objectives. So here, after you find your research gap and try to convert your research gap to research question or objective. And when you present it, try to mapping between each research question and objective, and also research question. I remember during my viva, Prof. Salwan was my external examiner. So her first question, she asked me, what is the mapping between your research question and your objectives? So directly I present for her, this is the table. So here there is a mapping between each gap and research question, objective, and contribution. So when you try to present your work in this way, so the examiner will fully understand you understand what you do, and also your supervisor, and you will present your work in professional, and you will don't have problem, and your viva or your paper easily go to publish or pass. So this is the final slide, and thank you for your listening.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Zaid, for a good explanation about the strategy technique and how you can prove the research gap on your research. So we move to the third segment. So we start this segment with a question to Dr. Zakree. Okay, Dr. Zakree, from your experience, how many reference or studies are needed to confirm the scientific guide? And another question is, what a reliable source for finding scientific gap and how research it? Can you answer?
Thank you, Norizal. 2 questions. Wow. It's not fair. I will protest later. Okay, how many references are needed to confirm a scientific gap? Well, as I spoke before, I'll give you a very good example. If you ask Professor Dr. John Nash, his answer is 2. Of course, he's a Nobel Prize winner. But in my opinion, to answer that question, it depends on your research frame and question. Definitely, we cannot say the exact number of references. There are no definite answers, but it depends mostly on the type of work done on the topic in the past and the validity of the paper to the researcher. Whatever methods we are using, either you call it systematic literature review, traditional literature review, methodology and paradigm approach should not have any bearing on the amount of needed. My point is actually, regardless of method, it is always quality over quantity. In my previous experience as examiner for the thesis, I give a very harsh penalty to a student just because he just rely and depends on his systematic review to show the gap. Why? Because when you use systematic review, sometimes you have this kind of what we call excluding criteria. For example, in his criteria, he exclude, let's say, it just include 5 years or 7 years of papers and only focus on certain sources. But the problem is that the question doesn't link or is not coherent to the research gap or the research question itself. So it has no link, and therefore the literature review failed. So, and of course, we don't need to cite everything in the literature. We cite it if it's necessary to accomplish your goal or to answer your research question. Choose reference that can show the gap. I always tell my students, you need to act like a lawyer. Okay, when you are defending your work in the viva or to the examiner or to the reviewer paper, you need to defend and by showing the best literature or the best paper that you can find. And of course, it's not just about descriptive or describing what you have found in the paper. You need to able to articulate it. What people say, find enough evidence, enough justification to support your research gap. But so another important point to consider is you should not provide the most promising literature in your relevant field. But I know students, this is a popular student questions among students. So if you still need numbers, I have a few guides. I read somewhere in the literature that a thesis of 100 pages, so you need at least 100 reference. And the one you should select should sufficiently, so I use the word sufficiently, cover your research area, and the paper must be peer-reviewed, and at least 85% of the reference should be within the last 5 years. I will tell you why 5 years. And 50% can be any years because it can be just, foundational. Okay, foundational, it's like you want to take the definition. For example, like GA, okay, the earliest like 10 or 15 years ago, you want to quote somebody who proposed GA, for example. It's okay to cite something that's older. So the second question, I hope that the first expression answered the first question. The second question is a very good question. If I may recall, what are the reliable source for finding scientific gaps and how recent? So how recent is, like you said, is quite relative. So the issue is why we need to look into sources and the quality of the sources is because when you use high quality sources to back up your points, to back up your argument and your research gap, you already demonstrate your own credibility as a researcher, right? For example, I'm an examiner. When you cite something to defend your gap, and I look into it, the paper is written by somebody I don't know, and the paper is written by an author from a publisher that I also hardly haven't heard of. Probably something, it's a paid journal. I'm not saying that all paid journals are bad. There are certain good, for example, Triple Access or Plus One. So you need to look into understand what does it mean to be a reliable source. So when we describe a source as reliable, in my opinion, I have two factors that I always look. First is the publisher, okay, the publisher. So whether we like it or not, in the academic world, publications are often judged by venue. Okay, venue, what I'm trying to say is venue means publisher. For example, there's a few examples of high-ranked venue, if I can quote or can cite. For example, Cambridge University Press, Oxford University Press, Springer, Elsevier, Thomson. Why I call it this venue or this publisher is highly respected, because in order for us to get published to this journal, which is indexed by, like for example, SIWS or Scopus, you need to go a thorough, rigorous editorial process, okay, in which an editor or group of scholars will evaluate our work. So this process is called peer review. Okay, so peer review articles are considered high quality because the review is already done the process of filtering out the bad authors for us. Another factor that I always look into is publication date. Especially for those in the first year of your PhD, keep in mind that when you will complete the study, when you quote or cite something is 5 years old, when you complete the study, because you will have problems during your viva, okay? Because you already cited articles that are close to the 5-year marks. So when you sit for your viva, of course you're going to wait around 3-4 months just to sit for your viva. You don't want your examiner to tell you that your citation is already obsolete and they already find a new paper that already cover your research gap. So that is a disaster. Okay, I guess I will answer both questions. I think we can. Thank you very much for the question.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Zakree. That was a clear answer. Thank you very much. I'll make it fair. You got 2 questions. I will also give Prof. Shahrul 2 questions. So it will be balanced. Okay, so Prof. Shahrul, I have 2 questions for you. The first question is it possible to use work experience to find the gap? For example, you're working on something as a work experience, it's not a research. And while you're working, you found a problem. And can you use this as a research gap? And how do you justify this? And the second question, so if you found a research gap, how can you decide if it's suitable for PhD or not?
Right, okay. Thank you, Muataz, for the 2 questions. The first question is about whether your working experience can be used for research, especially for PhD studies. Well, it's quite difficult to answer that question, the first question, because it depends on the type of your work experiences actually, right? Because not all work experiences can be translated directly into a so-called PhD research, right? But of course, I'm not saying yes or no, but of course, there are some experiences can be used for what you call for research, okay? Especially research which involve some elements of uncertainty. I just give you one example here. See, okay. Okay. This is a paper by one of my master student actually. Master student, yes, published in Decision Support Systems back in 2015, I think I'm not mistaken. Right. Here, and this work is based on his work experience. Okay, this fellow here, Shahrul, worked as a I think an engineer, Telecom Malaysia Research and Development, whereby one of his tasks was to identify fraud. Yeah? Fraud in what you call it, fraud in terms of people who subscribe for the communication account or telephone accounts within TM. Okay, for example, when you have a new customer, some of these customers they have already become a customer before at Telcom, but maybe he or she did not pay a lot of bills, so therefore he or she terminated the services and registered as a new customer with new identity, right? Maybe with new IC number and so on. So one of his tasks is actually to find this identity. Who is this person? Has he ever been registered before and so on, right? So that problem can be a research, okay? But you cannot directly translate into research unless you need to do some what you call, as Dr. Zaid mentioned, some detailed literature review. Okay, so it means that you need to compare with other similar problems, right? So in this case, we compare with crimes, identity crimes, whereby people falsify their own personal information, okay, and then credit application fraud detection. Okay, so these are problems related to his work, right? So all of this work related to identity matching, how you identify whether that particular person has previously become a customer to this what I call telecommunication industry, right? So yeah, it is not the question asked whether can the work experiences become a research? Yes, you can, but you need to also compare with other similar domains or similar problem which maybe share the same solutions, right? So in this case, it's about fraud in telecommunication industry. It's all about identity matching, and this problem match directly with some other fraud detection domain. Okay, in this case, crime identities. Okay, credit application fraud, and so on and so forth. Okay, therefore you can reuse or reevaluate back what other methods people have done for other domains, which can be matched or maybe be adapt to solve the current problem of in this case in telecommunication customer industry, right? Okay, that's one. That's I think believe answer the first question. Okay. Now the second question whether what was it? Whether how to decide whether a gap is suitable for PhD or not. Okay. Again, if student ask me this question, you need to discuss in detail with your supervisor. Okay? That's the role of supervisor to guide you whether is this gap suitable for PhD or not. Okay, so generally when you identify a gap, you generate a problem statement, right? Okay, when you have a gap, then you generate a problem statement. Then from the problem statement, you construct your research hypothesis, right? Okay, yeah, okay, and then you start to compare whether are these hypotheses match with other similar PhD studies of the same area. Okay, most of the research in AI, for example, they almost share similar hypotheses. We are not about we are very different from social science studies, whereby they have a huge number of hypotheses. Or within the AI research area, we have very small number of hypotheses, maybe 1 or 2 hypotheses, right? And most of the hypotheses are almost similar. It's just about technique that you apply might be different, right? So then you match whether your hypothesis match with other similar PhD hypotheses, right? If they are matched, it has been approved for a supervisor, then yes, you can say that your GAT is suitable for a PhD, for a PhD studies. Okay. Then Dr. Zaid mentioned a lot about literature review. I kind of agree with what Dr. Zaid mentioned. I think most of lecturers agree about the importance of literature review. Okay, from literature review or from literature work, recent literature work, then you will identify the gap. Okay, and then as I mentioned before, whether that gap is suitable for PhD studies, you need to look into whether the gap is novel or not. Yes, you can identify gaps, but that gaps might be not novel, right? It depends on how detailed you do your literature work, or it depends on the recency of approaches or tools used for database design. When you do literature review, you must have set of criteria what you want to compare, right? You cannot do literature review without specific criteria or framework. I think there must be some framework. For example, Dr. Zaid mentioned a few frameworks just now in terms of classification, I think, right, or predictive analytics, right? So in this case, you must have some criteria whereby you need to focus your literature review in terms of this criteria framework. So that should focus your literature review, right? From there, then you may further identify what are the gaps. Okay, what are the gaps? So in this case, some of this issue has not been addressed by most of these tools. Okay, another important issue nowadays about AI is about, although in my case this has been addressed most of the time, but if you read further more about the research areas in AI, is about explainable AI. Have you read about it or not? We call XAI, explainable AI. Yes, we may perform some predictive analytics. We may produce some prediction on certain areas, but how do we explain how we reach that conclusion? Okay, it has become black box now, right? It's just like black box. You arrive into a certain solution, but you're only sure how you arrive to that solution. That happened in most of the machine learning algorithm now. So the recent work now, I just go a bit ahead of the original questions. People not talk about explainable AI. You want to explain your solution. It is not just about providing the solution or providing the answer, but you want to explain your answer. Okay, it is all about transforming the black box. Okay, if you read into a glass box. Okay, so we can see actually, yes, you read this conclusion, you read this decision, but how you reach it, so that human can understand how we reach that certain decision. Okay, so I hope I answered those two questions. First is about how you can use your working experiences into a research, right? As I mentioned before, not all can be translated into research. You need to compare with other similar works in other domains maybe, right? And then the second question is about how to decide whether gap is suitable for PhD or not. Then, yes, I mentioned before, compare your hypothesis with other related areas, and of course, always confirm with your supervisor. Okay. Another way, I'm not really sure whether this is still a popular approach or not. During my study, during my PhD study, I presented few in good conferences. Okay, a good conferences. Not the so-called general conference, but good conferences. Usually, you presented your study within the first 2 semesters. First 2 semesters, and some conferences they have a special session for PhD's proposals. PhD proposals, and that actually is the best venue for you to get feedbacks from others in terms of the novelty of your research. And then second, of course, whether your gap or your research area is suitable for PhD or not. Yeah. Right. Okay. So during my time, I present in 2 conferences. One in the ER conference, which is one of the top conferences in database or contextual modeling. The second is conference on automated software engineering. Okay. Yeah, these 2 conferences where I managed to get good feedbacks from professors from various areas. All right. Okay. That answer my question hopefully. Inshallah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Shahrul, for the explanation. Now the next question is for Dr. Zaid. Okay, from your perspective, what the researcher, why you are working on it? What is your opinion?
Sorry, I don't hear your question well.
Okay, tak apa. So, okay, I repeat again. Okay, from your perspective, what to do if the gap is fulfilled by other researcher while you are working on it? What
Okay.
is your opinion?
Yeah. Okay. This is interesting question. And my answer for this question it's related what I presented before. So for that, I recommend for the PhD student or researcher to have target for monthly process, and during this time, so it he or she have to check the code journals or the related area to find is there any related topic is published or not. And the second thing is it may be happen with any of you because now the world is more than 7 billion. So you can say it. Maybe there are many students is thinking like you or on same topic. So for that, try to publish the first idea quickly. So, for example, maybe some students they say during the first year I cannot publish in high impact factor journals or something like that. So try to discuss with your supervisor to select, for example, good conferences to publish the first idea or the first contribution, and this is you will be in the safe side. And maybe you select, for example, good journals with the special issue for the journal. So in this one, you will get one paper published in conference and also opportunity to select for good journal. So try to publish your idea quickly to be in the safe side. And uh, for the monthly you have or weekly you have to discuss with your supervisor about your progress, what you achieve, and this is because this you will fight with unknown person. So suddenly you will find same topic, same area. For example. Last 2 months, I spent a lot of time to write one review paper about machine learning and deep learning approach for diagnosis COVID-19. And after I submit to Q1 journals, so then I got a notification from the editor. He said there is some topic that's already published in other journals. So in this case, what I do, I try to convert the approach. I don't leave it because I spend a lot of time. So I convert it from machine learning and deep learning to other approach. For example, so I try to do a review about the databases and measurement for diagnosis COVID-19. But in the case of PhD students, so my recommendation is try to publish the first idea quickly. So, for example, I remember I published my first idea in Information Science Journal within 7 months after I started my PhD, which is top 10 journal with 5.9 impact factor. So after that, I remember my supervisor told me, Zaid, now you are in the safe side. Now you are in the safe side. So please, when you have I try to publish your idea quickly. Select a good conference, and maybe you can extend the conference paper to good journals after you have more results and extend your the first paper. This will be in the safe side, and always you have to discuss with your supervisor and try to monitor the good journal which is interested with your topic.
Okay, agree with explanation by Zaid. Okay, we already on the last question for this segment. So this last question is go to Dr. Zakree. Okay, Dr. Zakree,
Yes.
how much can we rely on the experiment result to get the gap? This question might be answered, might be covered by Dr. Zaid on the previous slide, but we want from your opinion. Can you give your opinion?
Yes, I do agree with Dr. Zaid. I remember when the question was, can we rely on the experiment results to defend our gap, right? When I was a student, my supervisor told me that I must have initial results for my PhD proposal defense and also to defend my research gap. I don't get it because it's not you can start to provide initial results during the proposal defense. But I don't question her, so I just followed what she had asked. And when I presented my initial experiment results to the panel of supervisors, panel of sport professors, they don't ask too much of question my research questions or research gap, as I have proved my hypothesis is right that by providing them the experimental or the empirical results, that it shows that the existing methods or techniques are lacking. So then I truly understand why I've been requested to prepare and to find the initial results before proposal defense. But however, there's a danger to it. First, we need a strong logical review to argue why I'm comparing my results to the selective algorithm, to the existing algorithm, to the state of the art algorithm. What measures being used? Is it enough by accuracy? Is it I need to support with F measure, ROC, and other baseline and benchmarking? So there are few situations where we shouldn't use our experiment results to support our research gap. First, if there is insufficient or imprecise information. Second, if you feel that we've been biased, when you choose your comparative algorithm, please don't be biased. And third is when the result is inconsistent, or unknown consistency results. collected from the previous journal. So to answer that question, yes, we can rely our experiment results, but it also depends on what kind of measurement that we are using. For example, to tabulate just accuracy doesn't mean that the existing algorithm or technique that you propose are better than the existing one and show that the algorithm or the existing technique have some flaws, because your research gap was about balancing exploration and exploitation. Accuracy is just another end of results, so it doesn't prove or show anything of your research gap. So what I'm trying to say, my key point here is make sure that the data and the results that you presented can be directly used to show the gap, because especially in data mining, when they just show the end results, which is usually accuracy or ROC, it doesn't show the behavior of the algorithm. It doesn't show which technique has contributed to the better results. So you need to beef up and prepare with a good data. So in order to wrap up, that what you need is the right data, okay, that answers your research question and that can be used to point out directly and be used to defend the research gap. I hope that answered the question.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Zakree, for your answer. I just want to add a point to Dr. Zaid's presentation regarding loving what you do and researching into or finding the questions that you would love to work on. I learned this while doing my PhD, which is if you work on a question that you're not really interested in, then it will be a stress to you. And if you like what you're working on, so try to write your question in a way that you love it, to work on it, so it will be a passion instead of a stress. So your question, try to form it and discuss with your supervisor that this question, that's the one that you will have passion toward. Therefore, when you study your literature review to find the gap, you will be interested to read this literature review. So if you have 100 papers to read and you have few months to finish them, you'll be eager to finish them. You will have every day on papers, you will read them, you will mark them, you spend time. So just make sure your research question is interesting to you so you can have passion towards your work, therefore you will publish a good quality papers. And then the research gap will just pop out because you understood the domain. Right now, we just finished the third segment of the session. The fourth session is Q&A, so we'll take your questions, and I can see a few questions now in the chat. And one of the questions that I find interesting is directed to Dr. Zaid, is can we publish an idea in a review paper? So if you have a review paper, our idea, can we publish it in it instead of the solution? So what's your thought on this?
This is an interesting question. Thank you, Muataz. And it's coming from Ali Said, I think. For this question, I don't agree with him to write down the certain contribution in the review paper, because maybe for anything will happen, he will be delayed some time to work on his contributions, and maybe other researcher read his paper and try to implement and publish before him. So in this case, what my suggestion? My suggestion is write down, and this is one of interested section in a review paper. When you try to write a review paper, the interested point for the editor or the reviewer is something called challenging or also future direction section. So try, Ali, try to put your idea as in different way, not in certain way what you will do. For example, talk about the theoretical gap in this technique, and there's also some possible way to improve the performance of this technique by using X, Y, Z, but don't mention your exactly idea. Your idea you can put in the literature review chapter in your thesis, but because this is a review paper, and for anything maybe will happen, so try to put in different way.
Okay, thank you. Right, we have another question. The question is from Facebook Live. So this question I think maybe to Prof. Shahrul. Okay, the question is came from Ahmad. When writing a problem, should we consider who are the readers, if they are experts in the same field or just interested or just readers, and what we should concern between them? Then, Prof. Shahrul.
Yes. So when we write problems, should we consider who are the readers, right? Okay. Okay. The purpose of writing a problem statement is that we want to do research. Okay. I'm not really sure what Ahmad means in terms of readers here. Are you referring to readers of your journal papers, or are you referring to readers who are in terms of who are they in terms of your proposal defense and so on? Okay. But when you write problem statement, usually we write problem statement within the research area. Okay. Therefore, readers are usually people who are in the same field of us, right? So means that it is not about who other readers are, but it's when you write problems statement, it's just about how you want to achieve your research directions. Okay, and I don't think we should concern about who are the readers. The main concern is that how you translate your findings or your state of the art from your literature review, and how you transform those literature review or your findings from literature review into GAP, and from there you transform into problem statements, right? Of course, when you really move smoothly from the literature review process to the what you call to identify the state of the art process into the problem statement, if you move smoothly, then you will be able to find good problem statements, and regardless who the readers are, right? Of course, you want your problem statement to be appreciated by people who are in the same area of you. Okay, right? Okay, that answers my question.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Shahrul. Another question, and I think it might be directed to Dr. Zaid, but maybe Dr. Zakree can also contribute to this answer. The question says, what type of paper we can publish to the conference if we want to just point out our idea and let it out there? What type of paper? Does it include results as well, or just analysis or limitations?
Okay, Mohamad, thank you for the question. Actually, it depends on what the conference you try to submit your paper. For some conference, it's only interest or the scope for the conference only for result paper. They don't interest to publish review paper or something like that. So it depends on the conference and what kind of paper they accept. So please try to read the information from the conference page and try to understand what kind of paper they accept. And after you discuss with your supervisor, try to submit your paper.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Zaid. Dr. Zakree, do you have anything to add to this section is there anything you would like to add?
So the question was what type of paper that can present, is right?
Yeah, what type of paper we can present to take our idea out there. And before you answer the question, Mr. Norizal, is there any like a very crucial question you might add for Dr. Zakree to answer?
Yeah. I think this question might be the last question, and for in this segment, the question is if there problem in another area like in business, and we are trying to search research studies that fits this problem using information technology, are we on the right way to find the gap?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Norizal. The first question about what type of paper, I think Dr. Zaid has explained it and answered the question in a clear way. I think we can understand that. The second question is we try to search research studies that fix the problem using IT. Are we on the right way to find gap? I think yes, but you need to refine the question because the domain area is in business. Okay, like there are so many researchers in faculty that their domain research area is for healthcare, okay. But whether they can fix it using IT, because the word IT there is so general. So the question is so still generic and still general, and you need to narrow it down, refine it, the question until you have the right question. For example, fix the problems. So you need to identify what are the problems in the business IT, in the business domain, and what are the solutions or what are the current technique or approach being used in solving that problem that exists in that business. Okay, and more you can how you can look into this question is to find in find the literature about the technique being used to solve the problem in business, not to discuss too much on the business problem, but the problem exists in the existing technique in the IT. I hope you understand that. Perhaps Prof. Shahrul or Dr. Zaid can help me to clearly discuss what answer this question.
Okay, I think we now is end of the segment, for Q&A. Peter, you have anyone to add?
No, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Prof. Shahrul. Thank you, Dr. Zakree. And thank you for Dr. Zaid for your knowledge and sharing with us all of your experience in finding and identifying and presenting research gap. So before we close the session, can we have a picture screenshot on the Zoom? So if you can open your camera and we can take a picture before we close the session, that would be nice. And even the participant, if you can open the camera, all of us, I think that would be good. Okay, I almost see everyone camera now. Okay, I'm taking it in 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you everyone
for joining our
Thank you everyone. Thank you. And have a good day.
Okay.